Daemon had been married young to the Lady of Runestone, but he could not stand her, referring to her as the bronze bitch and finding any excuse to be gone from Aaron's Vale. Viserys put him on the small council, but Daemon was bored by governments and instead was soon put in charge of the ramshackle City Watch, which he reformed and outfitted to their new iconic gold cloaks. His method of law enforcement were successful, but often excessively brutal, and he gained a notorious reputation as a gambler, and lecher in low neighborhoods of the capital. Now, that's a quote from the Rogue Prince, and it's about Daemon Targaryen, who will be a main character in this up-and-coming series entitled House of the Dragon. He will be a main character, but there is a lot to be discussed about this character. In this video in particular, I want to discuss a potential casting leak, or casting notice rather, that you'll see making the rounds in the next few weeks of the internet about Daemon Targaryen and Aemond One-Eye Targaryen. Now take this information with a grain of salt, as it's more or less a load of bullshit, but as always, here's your sign. Now before we get started, if you could please do me a massive favor and slap a like on this video, as the like goal is going to be white for 420. Also, and this is the most important part, make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications turned on, so that way you'll get alerted every single time I drop a video throughout this long night. And a special thank you to Brick23, Bloody Tyrant, Leah Hendrickson, Angie Delehanty, Nancy Tockstein, Marilyn Miller, Fred Wicks, BEL-a-Donna, Cater Swat, and Joe Sweat. They are all members of my Patreon family over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews, and if you all watching are interested in joining, check out the link right up here or the link down below in the description. I also announced in my last video that I was doing a giveaway for some drawings I had done. When I did some research, I found out that it costs an insane amount of money to ship a single piece of paper to the UK or anywhere really that's outside of the continental United States. So the contest is still in fact ongoing, and I've decided to add in an extra House Targaryen emblem that I did for anyone who wins that's outside of the United States. They'll receive 2 digital copies of these. All you have to do to enter this contest is slap a like on this video, leave a comment down below, and make sure you're subscribed. The winner will in fact be picked in my next video. Now for those who are unaware, I actually released a plot outline video with a bunch of budget and inside info about House of the Dragon and the progress that it's making. I've linked it down below in the description or right up here. Make sure you go watch that. Daemon Targaryen is a multifaceted individual who can be cruel, he can also be loving, kind, ambitious, but mostly he's a bit of a cunt. A lot of his story actually takes place before the Greens versus Blacks, which is the timeline that we were given for House of the Dragon to take place in. So really it depends on how far into that actual story they start, because most of his story, like I just said, takes place before the events. Like some of his most interesting journeys and travels that he's gone on and events that have happened in his life really take place before the great tourney that is held in 111 AC, celebrating the 5th year anniversary of Queen Alicent and King Viserys Targaryen. Prince Daemon is actually King Viserys' younger brother, both of which are grandsons to King Jaehaerys, the wise king, the old king, the greatest king to ever have ruled Westeros. Prince Viserys and Prince Daemon, who is the main character of The Rogue Prince, which is the book that I read out of at the beginning of this video, they are the grandsons of Prince Jaehaerys. And all of this is about 130 years before the current events of the War of the Five Kings, or what's going on in a Game of Thrones. I'm just reiterating this because I see a lot of comments and people questioning of like when exactly this is going to be taking place. So just to summarize some of the events that happened to Prince Daemon prior to the defining moment where the Greens versus the Blacks were established, he was actually known as Lord Fleabottom. This happened when he was given the position of being commander of the City Watch, and he's the one that actually changed the name from like them being known as the City Watch to the Gold Cloaks. He gave each of them like golden cloaks that they were known as ever since Prince Daemon gave them to them. He also reformed it. He turned them into like a much more formidable fighting force. He had like 2,000 men under his control, and he increased their armament. And the way he actually got the nickname of Lord of Fleabottom is that he spent so much time on the streets. He actually had this woman named Massaria, who was I guess a whore. She was his mistress of whispers, so she would inform him of what exactly is going on in the Silk Road and what's going on in Fleabottom. He would torture the criminals, pickpockets, and thieves, murderers, and everybody, and just spend so much time there that the small folk in Fleabottom Fleabottom called him Lord Fleabottom. He was known to get off on the torture of criminals. Just some other little side notes about Prince Daemon. It's rumored from the testimony of the Mushroom. Mushroom was this court jester who, I quote, his head was so large he was called Mushroom, but his dick was just as big to match. Now, this dude was basically considered TikToked by the higher-ups during the reign of King Viserys I. So Mushroom was privy to all the secrets and all the bullshit that was going on in the upper-class folks in King's Landing during this time period. So, according to Mushroom's testimony, Prince Daemon actually deflowered Alicent Hightower, who is his brother King Viserys' wife, who is the leader of the Greens. He also apparently, who he later, marries Rhaenyra, who is the leader of the Blacks. She was rightfully appointed to be the queen of Westeros by King Viserys I before he died. Daemon eventually marries her, but it was also said that he taught her how to best touch a man to bring him pleasure. Basically, he taught Rhaenyra not to mash it like Gale the Snail. Now, I'm gonna do a video on the testimony of the Mushroom all by itself, because it's basically like a secret guide to what may be some of the biggest twists and turns of the House of the Dragon. But some of the other things, quickly, that the testimony of the Mushroom mentions is that Rhaenyra's children, those being Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey, who she had with her husband, who is from House Valerian, are all bastards to Harwin Strong, who was this dude known as Breakbones. He was a knight of House Strong, and at one point, he was the heir to Harrenhal and the captain of the City Watch. Mushroom also claims to have aided or basically come up with the idea of the sowing of the seeds, which was a point during the Dance with Dragons where everybody was getting low on dragon riders because they were all killing each other left and right. But Rhaenyra comes up with the ingenious idea to offer all of the dragon seeds that are around Dragonstone to try to mount the dragon in order to join up her cause and fight against the Greens. Mushroom mentions that he actually tried to mount the dragon himself and got burned his pantaloons in the process. That dragon was Silverring, who is the dragon of Queen Alicent, also known as Viserys and Daemon's grandmother. Speaking of Daemon, let's get back on track here. Now, giving you more on the back history of Daemon before we get into the leaked part, he did this thing called the Conquest of the Stepstones. In 106 AC, Prince Daemon led a massive army to try to conquer the Stepstones, which are basically south of the Narrow Sea, which separates Westeros and Essos. He actually had the support of some of the high houses, including Corlys Velaryon and his fleet of ships. They also, during this time down there, they aren't very kind to people. So Daemon makes a bunch of enemies while he was trying to conquer the Stepstones. This will later come back to bite him in the ass in the actual Dance of the Dragons. Now, while he's down there, he does manage to conquer the Stepstones and actually gets a crown. And this sort of all leads up, now obviously some more things happen, but this all culminates during the tourney that celebrates the 5th anniversary of Alicent and Viserys. He arrives there and actually hands over his crown. Now, there's a bunch of shit that happens between Daemon and Viserys that drives a wedge between them, but when Viserys openly accepts Daemon to come back after his conquest of the Stepstones and thinking that he has changed because he's a father. Once he gets back, neither time nor his age or anything has really changed Daemon, and he pretty much gets back to his old tricks, and he is mean to Alicent and starts sort of courting Rhaenyra. This is when he likely teaches her how to pleasure a man, and he actually takes her maidenhood, which drives even more divide between the two brothers. Now remember, I told you, according to Mushroom, Alicent and Daemon once had a thing, because obviously Daemon took her maidenhood. Now, what's probably drove the wedge between those two and what made Daemon pick a side is that obviously with Rhaenyra, he's closer to the crown or the line of succession with, him courting Rhaenyra and potentially marrying her, but also he's probably jealous that Alicent is now married to his brother Viserys, who's like this fat, portly guy. He actually lost a couple of his fingers to sepsis. Now, I'm pretty sure this spin-off show, House of the Dragon, since it's going to be making an adaptation and not telling the exact story from the books because, well, that's impossible. I'm pretty sure they're going to play up that aspect of the differences between the two brothers that I'm positive will be able to show and exemplify the tumultuous background these two brothers have had, since we're not going to be able to see their whole history on screen and on the show. All of these events that actually happen in this show's timeline that we don't get to see on screen will likely be referenced and expanded upon by other characters, and maybe we'll get to see the actual version of what happens. For events and plots that are sort of left up for interpretation, description in the novels. Now, before I get into the 2 leaked casting descriptions that I have, I want you all to let me know, who would you cast as Mushroom? Mushroom, who is the dwarven fool that is alive during the events of the Dance of Dragons, and a lot of his testimony is referenced by Archmaester Gillidan, even though some historians say that it's a load of crap. Who do you think could play him? I'm pretty much at a loss for actors, so let me know you all's choices down below in the comment section. Now, this person claims that the casting description for Daemon Targaryen and Aemond One-Eye have in fact gone out. Daemon, his casting description is being described as they need to be a male actor between the ages of 35 to 45, they need to be tall, and they need to have masculine features and a strong build. They also, this is like the footnotes, it says that they must be able to ride a horse and have several years of sword training required, which is obvious. Doesn't need to really be explained from what I just told you of all the info about Daemon's travels. Obviously, the guy needs to swing a sword. But their short list of actors include Jamie Bell, who recently played Elton John in the biopic movie, and also Jumper, which was one of my favorite movies from a while ago. It was pretty good. Jamie Bell is one of those actors that has a bunch of experience, but he's got one of those faces where it's like, oh, I think I know him from something, but it's not going to distract you from the point of him playing this new character. The only thing that I think kind of throws me off about him playing Daemon is that he does seem kind of young to have done all this stuff, and the show, or the adaptations rather, like Game of Thrones, tend to age everyone up a little bit. So I don't know if he's the right age or necessarily even the right build. I do kind of remember him being a little bit smaller than Hayden Christensen in Jumper. Although, you know, I haven't seen that movie in years, so I could be wrong. Another actor they're considering is Jamie Bamber, and he's from Battlestar Galactica. I'm not really familiar with that show, but I heard it has something to do with beats and bears, and that something like the main character, Dumbledore Calrissian, is, I don't know, but the actor does look like he could play the part of Daemon Targaryen. And another one that's on the short list that's my personal favorite choice, which doesn't really work unless they go with the aged, traveled, veteran warrior look, is the guy who played Frank D'Amico. I'm talking about Mark Strong. This guy was from Kick-Ass, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. He played Frank D'Amico, that mob boss villain, so he has played a bad guy before, and we do know that Daemon has to be able to play aspects of a likable character and be a bit of a baddie. But as far as the physical aspect, he doesn't really look, well, anything like Daemon Targaryen. I mean, from the graphic depictions, or from the artist depictions that we've seen of George's description in the books, Daemon is never bald. They could always put a wig on him. But as far as acting talent, I think Mark Strong's, if these choices are correct, or the shortlist is correct, I think Mark Strong is one of the strongest choices, with Jamie Bell being the most likely. Now on to the Aemond One-Eye casting. This description goes that it needs to be a male actor of age 18 to 25. They need to have a slim, athletic build and must have androgynous features, and the role requires some sword and stunt work. The short list for the actors include Alex Pettyfer, who I'm not really that familiar with, although I looked it up and his IMDb said he was in Magic Mike, so I definitely haven't seen that movie. Another choice is Harry Melling, who, in my opinion, I feel like if an actor is going to look like, just continue down that path of like looking like there's something a little bit off with him and that plays into the role, Harry Melling is an excellent choice. This is the guy who played Dudley from Harry Potter, and he has lost a bunch of weight from that role, so he definitely has the slim build. If that's true, I feel like that's an excellent casting choice to play Aemond One-Eye. And then lastly, they mentioned Keir Gilchrist, who I don't really have that much experience with other than watching him in that movie It Follows, which came out in 2014. It was an amazing movie. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend. Now, as far as those choices for Aemond One-Eye, I feel like the best would be Harry Melling. He is an English actor, and like I said, he's known for playing Dudley in the Harry Potter movies, but also, more recently, he was known for playing the no arms, no leg guy in the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. That was probably the most sad, gut-wrenching moment from that movie, and I didn't really like that movie, but his acting, and then like being thrown off the cliff at the end of that was just crazy. He's also, his acting career is in bloom. He was just in The Old Guard with Charlize Theron recently, The Lost City of Z in 2016, 16. He was in all the Harry Potter movies. So his film career is in fact taking off, but he's not one of those faces where he is going to be remembered for another character that he's already portrayed. Now, since we're making pretty good time on this video, I'm going to wrap it up with a brief book description of who Aemond One-Eyed Targaryen is, since I talked about Daemon for so much, and technically both of these characters are starting to be cast. Now, to clarify, Prince Aemond Targaryen was the second son of King Viserys and Queen Alicent. So his mother and he is on the greens. His brother is King Aegon II, who is the one who gets crowned sort of like parallel with Rhaenyra, and I actually talked about King Aegon II a bunch in my last video, which if you haven't seen, it's linked, it's one of these cue cards that's been going off throughout this video, or it's linked as the top link down below in the description. Go watch that. Now, Aemond is actually described, and I keep saying Aemond, but the D is sort of silent. The D is there. So Aemond was described as being basically twice as hot-headed as his older brother, King Aegon II. And as children, they actually hated Rhaenyra's children, Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey, because they, according to Aemond's older brother, the future King Aegon II, they were Harwin Strong's bastard children. So he called them strong, which was an insult to them, obviously saying they were bastards. And remember, according to the testimony of the Mushroom, all of Rhaenyra's children that were Valerian were actually secretly Harwin Strong's bastard children. But there's a point in the story where the children have a duel, and in this duel, Aemond has a dagger slashed at his eye, and this is where he actually loses his eye. Later on, at some point, puts a blue sapphire in that bitch. But growing up, Alicent's children and Rhaenyra's children hated each other, mainly because their parents do, or their mothers did, and they passed that on to their children. But also, Aemond kind of had a point, or a little bit of, when you're a kid anyway, a little bit of motivation for hating them, mainly because since Rhaenyra was the next in line for the Iron Throne, all of her children were as well, which superseded King Aegon II, or future King Aegon II, and his brother Aemond One-Eye. Now, it's kind of interesting that both of these casting notices go out at the same time, seeing as how both of these characters' fates, that being Prince Daemon and Prince Aemond, who, if I didn't do a good job of clarifying, Prince Daemon is Prince Aemond's uncle. But it's interesting that these casting notices went out at the same time because their fates and how they die are ultimately intertwined. Now, I have discussed that massive battle above the God's Eye before in my videos, but since I feel like we're getting a lot of people who have not, or are not aware of the events of the House of Dragon, I'm going to start going into detail of those events in more in-depth spoiler videos that are specifically following the guidelines of the books, which in my opinion are the most confirmed spoilers that we're going to have for this show, because that is the ultimate guideline they are following while writing it. Now, just to reiterate before we get out of here, Daemon, the casting notice, the actor needs to be a male actor between the ages of 35 to 45, have a tall build with masculine features, and also be able to ride a horse and have several years of sword training. The actors on the short list include Jamie Bell, Jamie Bamber, and Mark Strong. For Aemond One-Eye, the casting description needs to be a male actor between the ages of 18 to 25. The actor needs to have a slim athletic build and must have androgynous features, and the role will in fact require some sword and stunt work. Their short list includes Alex Pettifer, Harry Melling, and Keir Gilchrist. Well, alright, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this video, as the like code is going to be 420. Also, make sure to subscribe to make sure you have your notifications turned on, so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video throughout this long night. I want to give a super special thank you to every single person watching this video, and a super special shout out to every single member of my Patreon family over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews. And don't forget, if you want to enter that contest to win this House Targaryen sigil and this House Stark sigil, all you got to do is like this video, leave a comment down below, and make sure you're subscribed. I will be announcing the winner in my very next video. I want to thank you all again so much for watching. My name is Mark, and this has been Sir Hunts Reviews.